Give me the kitty cat bracelet, mother. Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam, and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today I'm going to give you a spoiler-free review of the first big action movie to hit theaters in over a year, and that's Nobody, starring Bob Odenkirk. So Nobody hits theaters and only theaters today, March 26th, but as the vaccine becomes more and more available and more people get it, more and more people are going out, there is a chance this movie will still be in theaters several weeks from now, so it might be your first movie to see in the theater, and I'll go ahead and start this review off by telling you, if you're the least bit interested in this movie, it's going to be something you're going to enjoy, and I'm going to go into some details as to why. Nobody is the second feature film from director Ilya Naishuller. I'm not sure I'm saying that right, but he is most famous for having directed Hardcore Henry, and I was very curious with Nobody, is it going to be as good as Hardcore Henry, not as good, and is he going to be able to replicate success with a very different type of movie? Now, it is a similar type of movie in the fact that it is a balls-to-the-wall action movie, but this is shot very straightforward. There's no real weird gimmicks or anything there, but there are some really interesting things that he does with the camera that I will talk about a little bit, again, without spoiling anything. Because I love Hardcore Henry. I think it's just a fantastic, fun ride of a movie, and the music video that sort of preceded it, Biting Elbows, Bad Motherfucker. I'll put a link to that in the description. It's a cool music video. If you like action stuff, you should definitely check it out. It's really badass. But going into Nobody, kind of my biggest question was, is this a new director that I'm going to be interested to follow going forward? Or did he get lucky with Hardcore Henry and is just kind of like everybody else? And I'm excited to say that I think this movie works, and I think we've got a new action director on our hands, and I cannot wait to see what this guy does next. And even though it's a familiar setup, you know, basic guy, lives in suburbia, turns out to be a killing machine, John Wick, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, The Equalizer, The Professional, you get my point. It's something you've seen a bunch of times. But with Nobody, Ilya uses this really brilliant shorthand where he sort of breezes over things that we as the audience already know or might already assume because we've seen this formula so many times. Now, I kind of hate to say formula because the story here is in no way formulaic. The only real formula is, again, basic guy that lives in the suburbs, turns out to be a killing machine. But ultimately, some things pan out the way you would expect, but this movie will surprise you a lot. I was actually surprised at how many times it was able to surprise me because Ilya will set things up in a way that seemed very familiar, and then he'll do something different with it, which I think is really clever. And again, that shorthand that he uses is almost kind of like he's communicating specifically with people who love these kinds of action movies, because it is sort of part of the language now, whereas this wouldn't have worked 20 years ago. You couldn't have done this shorthand because we didn't have all these pre-existing notions about this genre. If that makes sense, I might be getting a little lost in the weeds. And the surprises even begin with the casting. I mean, when they announced this movie, Bob Odenkirk being the main guy is really surprising. If you're not that familiar with him outside of Breaking Bad, he's essentially comedy writing royalty. I mean, he's written for Saturday Night Live, The Dennis Miller Show, The Larry Sanders Show. He created Mr. Show, which a lot of comedians and comedy writers consider to be one of the funniest shows ever made. And then he went on to write for several movies and ultimately Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. I'm a fan of the guy. I've always liked him. I think he's really funny. And then he also does a really good job with some dramatic acting. And in this movie, he gets to do both, which is not always the case. I mean, just the inclusion of him I think is really brilliant because he fits the theme and the type of story really, really well. He's a perfect choice. And in fact, the whole movie is cast really well. Christopher Lloyd plays his dad. He is not in the movie a ton, but he is having more fun than I've seen him have since Back to the Future. And that's not hyperbole. I mean, I haven't seen Christopher Lloyd have a really good time in a movie in a long time, and he has a blast in this movie. There's a fantastic bad guy, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And then the RZA, I always like him in movies. He's kind of a cool character to come into play, but you don't see him for most of the movie. He's mostly communicating over a ham radio, and he's better in audio than he is when he's on screen, which, being from the Wu-Tang Clan, kind of makes sense. So some more spoiler-free things that I like is that the movie gets into it right away and then it wastes very little time throughout the duration. Odenkirk's gun skills are fantastic. He definitely trained a lot. He's very smooth. He's doing a lot of like advanced things that people that have hours and hours of gun training do. You can see it and it looks good and it works for the movie. Daniel Bernhardt has a great appearance. He's one of my favorite stunt actors. He's been in a ton of stuff. He's been in The Matrix, John Wick. You've seen him fight in a ton of movies. He always gets beat up or killed by the good guy, but he has got a great appearance on a bus. In fact, one of his better appearances, he very rarely talks in movies, but he's got some speaking moments and he does a great job. Just as a movie fan, and I've liked him for years, it was cool to see him in this role and he stands out more than he usually does. Just continuing with the cast, Michael Ironside, you only see him a couple of times, but he is like a famous bad guy, and he actually doesn't play a bad guy in this movie, which I think, again, Ilya is just sort of using this shorthand to sort of communicate with fans that love this genre so much. And as a director, Ilya just manages to make everything interesting, which is a big plus, and it's not easy to do. I mean, something as simple as the intro sort of showing Bob Odenkirk's daily grind and how boring it is, rather than actually making it boring, it breezes through in like 30 seconds and it's very effective, it's engaging, it's stimulating, but you still get the theme and what he's trying to communicate to you without it being dull and boring. It's fantastic. And even something as simple as introducing the bad guy and having him walk across the street and into a nightclub. No, Ilya as a director knows to make it more interesting, to have him walk across a busy street, have cars swerve to avoid hitting him, have him walk into this big lavish nightclub with tons of extras everywhere in one single sort of Goodfellas type shot that goes across the street all the way through the nightclub. It's so much more interesting than just shooting it sort of the regular way, which is what I was most excited about, was that this is just a real movie. It's good. It's been a year since I've seen a real good movie in a movie theater, with the exception of Tenet. I'm just gonna shelve that one. Tenet counts. It's just an anomaly in an otherwise sort of movieless year. And I have said it before, but the movie respects the audience, which is really rare nowadays. Hollywood is just holding your hand too much, and their movies just aren't very interesting. This, for just an all-out shoot-'em-up type action movie, this one's exceptionally interesting, entertaining, and while it's not smart in sort of this cerebral, intelligent way, it's smart in a very clever, stimulating way, and I love it. But above all else, this movie is entertaining from start to finish, and that's really the most important thing a movie like this can accomplish. I mean, the line, "Give me the kitty cat bracelet, mother." I mean, that line earns you a lot of leeway in terms of little tiny plot points and things that might not quite make perfect sense. You can easily look the other way when the movie continues to entertain you like that. It's just total entertainment, absolute fun, and it is an action movie lover's movie. It's perfect for action movie lovers. Because this is Flick Connection and I am Darren Van Dam, I'm going to give you some additional recommendations. One of them is Hardcore Henry. If you've never watched it, it is one of the most balls-to-the-wall action movies ever made. It's currently available on Netflix, at least here in the US. The Man from Nowhere is a fantastic movie from South Korea. It is available on Prime Video. It is very similar to Nobody in a lot of ways, but it's much more serious. There's a lot of fantastic action in it, but there's also a lot more slow down times. But much more serious movie, not really much comedy in it at all, but still very good with similar themes. The Professional has a lot in common with this movie, and it is on Stars. Obviously, there are some big differences, but if you can't get out to see this and you want to scratch that itch, The Professional could be a great way to go, but I'm not sure there's anything that's going to quite scratch the itch that you have for this movie like John Wick. It's the closest thing in line. While Nobody is very different, it is parallel to John Wick in so many ways. It's gonna remind you of John Wick throughout, and that is a good thing in my opinion. If you're new to this channel and you haven't subscribed yet, not only do I do movie reviews like this, but I do long list of movie recommendations of things to watch on Netflix, Prime, and other streaming services. So be sure to click that subscribe button and click the little notification bell so you get notified when videos like this get released. Let's also thank the Patreon supporters in the comments below. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, there's a link in the video description. There's also a link to that Biting Elbows music video. I highly recommend that. And there's also a link to become a channel member if you want access to exclusive videos for even more recommendations from me. So you will literally never run out of good movies to watch. But I will keep making reviews like this as long as you keep watching them. Yes, I never acknowledged what happened to my face during this review, but you will see me on the next one.